Empezamos. ¿Listo? ¿Qué tal? Buenos días. Gracias por acompañarnos en esta serie de webinars de Max University. En esta ocasión tenemos el Demotech de Spectra Logic, donde tenemos a Jaime Uria, el Country Manager de Spectra para México y Latinoamérica, y tenemos a Steve Paulson, el Solution Architect de Spectra Logic, para profundizar sobre temas de workflow y la solución de Blackbird. ¿Okay? Los dejo con Jaime.
Oigan, muchas gracias por su presencia física y también en línea. Saben que hoy vamos a platicar acerca de los flujos de datos, flujos de trabajo de datos, flujos de datos de trabajo, ¿no? Data workflows. Tiene mucha relevancia con esta transición que la mayoría de las compañías están haciendo hacia la economía digital. Cómo sirven a sus clientes de mejor manera, cómo están transformando sus procesos a través de atención a web, están simplificando muchas de las cosas que están haciendo y eso genera flujos de datos. Entonces Steve es experto en poder platicarles acerca de cómo van cascadeando en los diferentes capas de almacenamiento, cómo darle valor a los datos asociándoles más datos, lo que le llamamos metadatos, para que puedan ser explotados de forma diferente. Y al final de esta presentación, que va a hacer hincapié en diferentes industrias, diferentes workflows, diferentes componentes, también va a haber una demostración del simulador. El simulador tiene objetivo para que ustedes lo puedan tener en sus máquinas, cargado, y que puedan abrir el diálogo con sus clientes de esos workflows que van identificando en ese momento. ¿Sí? Los dejo con Steve Paulson. Steve está basado en Colorado, en Boulder, Colorado, en nuestro corporativo. Él es el arquitecto para soluciones en América Latina y bueno, viaja constantemente a México. Está medio aprendiendo español. Yo voy a servir, si hay algún concepto que no queda claro, alguna duda, alguna pregunta, yo sirvo más o menos como de traductor entre ustedes. Entonces, si hay algo que no les quede claro, por favor, siéntense la confianza de levantar su mano, hacer la pregunta en español o en inglés, como se sientan más confiados, se la hacemos a Steve, y si no queda claro, yo también salto un poquito o hago alguna intervención. Entonces, encantado de poder ayudar. ¿Sí? Gracias.
Hola, mi nombre es Steve Paulson. Gracias por tu tiempo. Si tú tienes una pregunta, por favor, habla usted en español y Jaime puede ayudarme. Okay. So thank you very much for joining today. Thank you to MAPS for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about who Spectra is and what we do and where we fit in the marketplace. We want to be a good partner to you, help you grow your accounts. So today I'm going to talk a lot about our Black Pearl product. Spectra historically is known for tape libraries. We've also been in the disk market for a number of years with our Verde product, which you may be familiar with. Verde is just simple NAS, CIFS, NFS, Active Directory, that kind of thing. But Black Pearl is kind of it's the center of our world as we move forward in the marketplace. And I want to talk to you about the workflows where Black Pearl is making a big impact in the market. And I want to give you the opportunity to ask questions. If you have a customer with a problem, we can talk openly about how we could use this. I want to make sure you're very comfortable. You understand what Black Pearl is, what it does, and who Spectra is.
So to start, Black Pearl, think of it as a NAS. It's very simple NAS. With CIFS and NFS, a full Active Directory integration, we can replicate on a volume basis, and it's very inexpensive. It's very cost effective, but it is enterprise quality, and it's just simple. Everybody knows NAS. Just a quick look at what it looks like to set this up. This is how you would create a new pool on the NAS. Very easy user interface. You can select your parity level, your protection level. You can slide this back and forth, and it changes the array stripe size to show you what your configuration would look like, available storage versus overhead based on the configuration. And when you're satisfied with what you've got, you hit create, and you have a new pool of NAS. It's just that easy. Spectra Logic is most well known for our tape products. We've been in the tape business for, I don't know how many years, a long time. Close to 40 years. So we're very well established in the tape market, and a typical backup application with these different providers and more, they almost all have some kind of tape workflow, and we can work with all of them. And we can also be a NAS target for organizations that don't want to use tape anymore. They don't like tape, they want to get rid of tape, they just want disk. Black Pearl NAS is an excellent platform for that. But we're going to come back to this in a few minutes once I explain a little bit more about some additional capabilities that Black Pearl has. So Black Pearl, again, it's a simple NAS, but we've built in additional functionality to create an object store platform, an object storage gateway. This is specifically for archive. We wanted to apply an object storage methodology to archive using tape as a target for object storage. So the original purpose for Black Pearl was to put an S3 front end onto tape and to completely change the way that customers use tape. Historically, with backup applications, you need some kind of expensive software application to talk to a tape library. But we wanted to make it much easier to use tape as an archive target. And we're seeing a great amount of success with this. But some customers don't want tape. They don't like it. They want to get rid of it. That's no problem. Tape is just one possible storage target. We can put disk behind Black Pearl as an object storage target as well. The object database is maintained in Black Pearl on mirrored flash drives. We have a cache of spinning disk inside Black Pearl to manage the flow of data on and off of tape or to and from the object-based disk. We can also replicate to a remote system across the world or in another city for disaster recovery. And this is bi-directional, fully active replication. So you can always have 2 copies of your archive. We can also make a copy out to the public cloud, AWS or Azure. And we'll be adding Google Cloud support soon as well. Now, when you're using this as an object store, and if you're not familiar with object storage, it's like valet parking for your car. You don't have to know where your car is. You bring your car to the valet, you get a ticket, and the valet takes your car. And all you know is that when you want your car back, you give them your ticket, and your car comes back. That's what object storage is. You give your data to Black Pearl, and you've created some policies to create copies of your data. So you might have 1 copy on tape, 1 copy on disk, 1 copy in the cloud. But when you want your data back, you just tell Black Pearl, give me my data. Black Pearl will get it from the fastest possible target. So a little bit more about the policies that we use to direct where the copies are. In object storage, there's the concept of buckets. It's like a folder. The bucket is the container for all of the data. It's a flat namespace. There's no hierarchy of folders. When you create a bucket in Black Pearl, and we'll do this in a little while, when you create a bucket in Black Pearl, you assign a data policy to that bucket, that data policy will dictate how many copies and where. And that's up to the user. Depending on what storage targets you have available, you can create 1 copy on tape or 2 copies on tape with 1 ejected out of the library. You can have a copy on disk, but only keep it there for 6 months. After 6 months, it expires, and you still have a copy on tape. You can create a copy up in the public cloud for disaster recovery or distribution. Or you can create a copy on a remote Black Pearl system that also has a tape library or access to the cloud. It's up to you. You create the data policy, you assign the data policy to the bucket, and as soon as you write data into that bucket, Black Pearl does the rest, and it creates the copies for you. Now, we also have, internally, we have a bridge between the NAS and the object store. So on a volume basis, we can either copy or move all of the data from a volume into an object bucket. So for disaster recovery, if you're using just the NAS, if on a daily or weekly basis, you can schedule a copy of that volume to a Black Pearl bucket, which would write it out to tape. Okay, so it's a good, easy way to have disaster recovery. And when Black Pearl writes to tape, we write in an open format called LTFS, linear tape file system. You don't have to have a Black Pearl to read that tape. That LTFS tape, it's like a USB drive. You can take it anywhere. You can read it on any system with the LTFS drivers. So by maintaining this capability to copy or move from the NAS to an object bucket, this enables us to support a number of different workflows in different vertical markets. And we'll get into that, we'll explore that. So we've also created a couple clients that we make available for free. You can download them from our website. These clients have the ability to talk to the Black Pearl's object store via our Spectra S3 interface. The Eon browser is a drag and drop tool. It's like very much like FTP, any FTP client you've ever used. Your file system is on the left. Black Pearl's object buckets are on the right. And you drag and drop. So it's a drag and drop to and from tape. And we'll demonstrate this for you as well. The other client, if you have the ability to write scripts, or if you're working with a partner that has scripting capability and they want to sell that as professional services, we've created a Java command line interface that allows you to access Black Pearl's full API through the command line, through a script. If you have scripting capability, this is a very powerful tool to automate movement of data to and from Black Pearl's object store from your file system and manipulate that data at the same time. Now, going back to this slide with just backup applications, this would be one example of implementing some disaster recovery into your workflow, just using Black Pearl's capabilities. So if you're using Rubric or Acronis and you're writing your backups to a NAS target, and you want to have another copy of those backups written to an LTFS tape and taken offsite, Black Pearl has the ability to copy that volume to an object bucket and write it to an LTFS tape. If you do that, Rubric, Acronis, these guys, they don't know about the tape copy, but you can move that tape copy offsite, and if something happens, you can restore that tape copy to any instance of your backup application. Just bring it back to the NAS, and the backup application will be able to see and restore from that backup. So this is one example of a very simple workflow. And when we talk about workflow, a workflow is a series of steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 to achieve a purpose. That's what a workflow is. We have workflows in our daily lives. If you cook, the recipe for making tortillas, that's a workflow, right? We use workflows all throughout our daily lives. And in the storage market, what we are finding, because of where we fit in the storage market, the understanding of workflows and creating workflows using primary storage and secondary storage is very, very important for the business of your customer. Primary storage is very fast. You know, it's a sports car. It's like a Ferrari, but I can't afford a Ferrari, right? If I could afford one, I probably can't afford two. So we have to balance both the primary storage and secondary storage. Spectra, we do secondary storage. And so understanding the workflows, how to make 2 or 3 or even 4 storage layers fit within a workflow, that's the business that we're in. So moving beyond the concept of backup, let's talk about archive. Different people use the term archive differently. I want to be very clear about how we define backup versus archive. Backup is a copy of your primary data set. It's a very active data set. Your backup data set is constantly changing because it's constantly copying your active data. Archive is the data that does not change. It's the data that you don't want to back up anymore, right? It's the data that you don't want it living on your expensive storage. It's not changing. You're not accessing it often. You want to move that off to a lower cost tier of storage, but still have it available and know that it's safe and protected. So we are finding an increasing amount of archive solutions in general IT. As data is growing, no matter what industry you're in, if it's media and entertainment or video surveillance, high performance computing, whatever, data is growing and growing and growing. And more businesses are finding that they have to keep their data for a very long time. The data it's the lifeblood of the business. But as the data grows, typically the budget for the primary storage doesn't grow as fast. So let's say you have 2 petabytes of Isilon or NetApp, something very expensive, and it's filling up and you need to add more storage. What we have found is that probably 60 to 80% of the data on that primary storage isn't changing. It's inactive data, but it's taking up space on very expensive storage. So we've worked with some software partners to create workflows to allow the movement of data to a lower cost storage platform without changing the workflow of the user. So the user is accessing the Isilon either directly or indirectly through one of these applications. And this application is looking for old data. It's looking for data that hasn't been touched in a year or 2 years. And as it finds that, it can move that data off to a lower cost platform, but leave a symbolic link or something like that behind so that the user doesn't have to change the way they get to that data. If you're a researcher in biosciences and you have to go and find data from an instrument that's 2 years old and no one's touched it in 2 years, you would go and find it the same way you always did. The application sees the request and says, I know that I moved that to Black Pearl, I'm going to push it back to the user directly from Black Pearl. Okay? I don't have to put it back here. Different things can happen in the background, but it's invisible to the user, and it allows you to scale up your storage with a secondary tier at very, very low cost. What makes these partners of ours very special is that they have developed a direct integration with the Black Pearl object store. So if you wanted to implement tape in your environment, but as an archive, maybe you have a partition for backups, but if you wanted to implement tape as an archive, we'll get into video surveillance. This is a big market, and retention requirements for video surveillance are growing. I also support Canada, and Canada just legalized marijuana for everything, medicinal, recreational, but the government of Canada has now expanded requirements for video surveillance for all of these operations, sometimes up to 5 years. You have to keep your video surveillance up to 5 years. Do you want to keep that on disk? No, that's silly. Why not put it out on tape? And we're gonna talk more about what that can look like. But these partners of ours, in any kind of IT environment, they can seamlessly and invisibly move data either to a NAS or to Black Pearl's object store, and you can define the storage targets wherever you want that to be. So I encourage you to look into these partners of ours and understand who they are and what they do. If you have a situation, if you have a customer that has a particular problem, I am here to help you understand who these guys are. They all do things a little bit differently, but based on the customer's problem that they need to solve, based on the customer's workflow, we can make recommendations as to which partner is going to work well. But we really enjoy our partnerships with these guys because of how they can use Black Pearl. Let's talk a little more about a video surveillance workflow. So as I mentioned, the marijuana is a growing industry in Canada and the United States, and I understand that Mexico is now talking about legalizing it. You have the benefit of looking at the rest of the world. You can watch Colorado, where I'm from. We were one of the first, and we made a lot of mistakes. You guys get to learn from that. But the video surveillance needs around that industry, and not just that industry, it could be prisons, it could be corporate security, it could be anything. Video surveillance requirements are growing. Retention requirements are growing. Camera resolution is growing. A lot of times the government regulations say you have to have a certain frame rate, 30 frames per second, and you have to keep that. That means a massive amount of data has to be kept. And so this is a very fast growing industry. If you're not working in video surveillance, you really should be looking at this. This is a great moneymaker in a lot of ways. But we've worked with some of the major video management systems to integrate what we do into what they do. Now, most of them, they understand archive. They know they have to archive, and so they might have very expensive storage in the server. They run analytics in the server, and this is all part of their workflow. But once they've run their analytics on that footage, and they have to keep that footage for another 6 months, they don't want to keep that footage on the really expensive storage in the server. They want to move it out to a lower cost NAS, right? So Milestone, for example, we have a lot of installations with Milestone, and we plug right into their software. They mount us via a SIF share, and they can just, you set the policy in Milestone. After 7 days or 30 days, move it off to the archive volume, and it gets pushed off here. And when they need to get that footage back, it plays directly from here. They don't have to even bring it back to their primary storage. They can play it directly off the archive. Most of these guys work in a similar fashion. So by adding our low-cost NAS, we can scale up to 10 petabytes in a single rack on spinning disk. Okay, so we can grow as big as you want us to. Now, I don't have any video surveillance customers with 10 petabytes of my NAS. I would like to have one. So if you find an opportunity, please let me know. But we have all of our really excellent NAS options, the user-defined parity, the intelligent rebuilds. So if a drive fails, we'll take a spare and we'll rebuild only the data that we have to. Old hardware RAID systems, they would rebuild an entire drive, even empty space. We don't do that. We only rebuild the data that's on the drive. So our rebuilds are very fast, and we can move data up to 650 megabytes a second on a 10 gigabit Ethernet link. So this is the majority of what we have seen for video surveillance archive. However, we do have a couple customers using our internal bridge, that NFI bridge. I was working with a customer that had a 7-year retention requirement, and they needed to. They didn't need to keep it on the NAS for long. They needed, record it, push it off to tape, and just put it on the shelf for 7 years. So we worked this out, and we created an NFI policy to move that data almost as soon as the VMS wrote the data to the NAS. We would move it to an object bucket and write it to tape, and it goes out of the library for 7 years. It's easy, and there's no extra cost. And again, because we're writing an LTFS tape, it's an open standard. They can take that tape and hand it to the government official. The government can read that tape in any tape drive. Okay.
Nafas, si me permites, can you talk about the NAS, the kind of NAS that we have, the kind of drives, the recommendation?
Yeah.
Lo que pasa es que como muchos de los sistemas ven el almacenamiento a través de red, como NAS, y son file systems, hay ciertas funcionalidades que Steve les puede recomendar, pero sobre todo el tipo de drives, las combinaciones, los arreglos, porque hay veces que sus clientes dicen, oye, necesitamos velocidad o necesitamos almacenamiento, y eso tiene que ver mucho con cómo te aproximas, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que ahí Steve les puede hacer algunas recomendaciones, but any kind of recommendation that you can make about how to configure the NAS, the arrays, if they are looking for speed or retention or capacity or parity and things like that, and the kinds of drives that we have.
Sure. So as you can see, when we're creating the new pool, we give you the opportunity to select how many drives, and we do have different drive types, and we can mix and match all in one system. So in this case, we're looking at 36 4-terabyte SAS drives. Okay, 4 terabyte SAS drives. That's the smallest drive that we offer. For our NAS, we offer 4 terabyte SAS, 8 terabyte SAS, 12 terabyte SATA, and 12 terabyte SAS that's self-encrypted. So if you have an encryption requirement, our 12 terabyte SAS self-encrypting drive, it's a really excellent price point. It's actually very close to the 12 terabyte SATA, but it's a self-encrypting drive. So 4, 8, and 12. The 12, we have 2 different kinds. Typically for our stripe size, so if you look at this configuration, what do you notice? There's a lot of overhead, a lot of space that isn't usable. And we have double parity stripes, so this would be 4 plus 2 stripe and 6 of them. this system is going to perform very well. Having this many stripes and being able to stripe the data out wide allows us to perform pretty well, but you give up a lot of available capacity. Most of the time, when I'm working with a customer that they're running out of space, if we log into their system and we see something like this, the customer gets upset because there's too much overhead. I've paid for all this space, but there's just too much overhead. What we can do, and what I've done with a couple customers, is we add another set of drives with a different configuration. So I would move this to capacity. The number of stripes would shrink, but grow deeper. And then the overhead space would shrink. So, and I would create another pool with a more efficient use of space. But then we can move volumes internally between the pools. Okay, so if they've got one volume spread across this pool, and it's well, this gives us about 87 terabytes. If they've got a volume with 60 terabytes and they're running out of space, well, in this situation, I would sell them some 12 terabyte SATA drives. I would create a pool that's large enough to accommodate the existing volume, move the volume to the new pool with a more efficient use of space, and then I can change this pool. Once I've moved the volume off, I can delete this pool and create a much more efficient use of space. And then they would have two pools with two different drive types, but all in the same system. If they really needed to stay in one single pool, then I would sell them more 4 terabyte drives. Enough drives to move that volume, break this one down, and then use these drives to expand the new pool, leaving them with a single pool. So it really depends on your customer. It depends on what they need. But we offer the 4, 8, and 12 terabyte drive options. The 12 terabyte SATA drive is what allows us to get to roughly a petabyte of usable space in 4U of the rack. A petabyte in 4U. That's with the 12 terabyte SATA. We use an expansion chassis. It's very deep, but it's 4U high. 96 drives in that chassis. So we can also put flash drives into our NAS. We have not seen a great demand for that. Again, we are secondary storage. We are not trying to compete against Isilon or Pure or NetApp Flash. They're the tier 0 or tier 1. We are tier 2. So we complement them. We do not compete against them. So while we can put flash in our NAS, we haven't seen a great demand for it. Sometimes what we can use flash drives, SSDs, as a cache, a write cache or a read cache, if that's needed. But generally speaking, most of our business right now is with the 12 terabyte SATA drives. Where were we? Okay, so back to video surveillance. Any questions about video surveillance? Probably our largest market right now with Black Pearl is in media and entertainment. So we've been working in this market for quite a number of years with our Black Pearl product. If you are in media and entertainment accounts, you know that they also understand archive, and most of them use tape for archive. If you are producing movies or television shows or whatever it is, you probably have tape in your environment. The traditional workflow for archive in M&E involves what we call middleware. The middleware is a stack of software, typically very expensive, very complex, but this is what has been required to use tape, right? So you've got, let's take Avid. We've been working with Avid for a long time. So if Avid wants to write archive data to tape, you know, their primary storage, Avid ISIS or Nexus, very expensive, right? So if they want to archive to tape, they have to go through layers of middleware, SGL FlashNet, Front Porch Digital Diva, something like that. A very expensive software stack which controls the tape library, moves the data back and forth. It's very complex and it's very expensive. And we're seeing the support costs on this middleware going up. So what we have done is to replace that middleware with Black Pearl, with our Spectra S3. So because these asset management tools, they all understand archive, we plug directly into their archive functionality. So their users don't experience almost any change at all. They still archive things the same way that they used to. But by replacing the middleware with Black Pearl, with an appliance, and all of the intelligence that's built in, we give them a much more cost-effective, much easier, and much higher performing archive workflow. And particularly in this market, this is where we found great usefulness for Arctic Blue, which is our object disk target. So if you're a TV station and you've produced your next broadcast, and that broadcast aired, at this point you probably want to move it off your primary storage. You don't need it there anymore. So you can archive it out to Arctic Blue for 6 months, because you might need to get that back really fast, right? Or let's say, anybody watch the Olympics, the Olympic Games? Yeah. So for the next Olympic Games, the broadcasters, they may need to have footage queued up from the last Olympic Games, right? Well, all of that footage exists here. They can stage all of that archive footage up to disk, still within the archive, so that as their editors need to pull from the last Olympic Games, they can get that back immediately. It's very, very fast to bring it back into their primary storage so that they can use that content. This would be a good example of, you know, a temporary copy on disk and a permanent copy on tape. So whether you're just archiving, but you might need to get that footage back really fast and you don't want to wait for a tape library, you can put a 3 or 6 or 9 month copy on Arctic Blue and get that performance on the read for that time. But after that time, this copy will expire and then it would just come back from tape. But Black Pearl is smart enough to know where that data still is. Even after the 6 months, even after the date when it expired, Black Pearl will still know if it's still here. And, you know, a year and a half later, if it happens to still be here, Black Pearl will know, and if you request it, it will come back from there. We just won't guarantee after that period of time that it's still there. We also see a number of customers using remote replication in the media and entertainment space. We have a customer in the UK called ITV. They have a Black Pearl and a tape library in one city. They have another Black Pearl with a different kind of tape library and a different kind of tape in another city. And those Black Pearls are replicating back and forth. So they always have 2 copies of their archive on 2 different types of tape. This is all about protecting all of their assets. So, yeah.
Tiene que ser similar a la playa, digamos, el máster que la replicación.
Esa es una buena pregunta. Have to be on similar configurations, the master and the other appliance that is receiving the data?
No, they can be very independent configurations. So the Black Pearl at site 1, you could have only Arctic Blue, only disk. The Black Pearl at site 2 has a tape library. These Black Pearls are replicating, so your primary operation might be on the Black Pearl that has the disk side, but it's replicating to this Black Pearl and being written to tape over here. No problem. You can have any storage targets that you want behind either Black Pearl that don't have to match. So when this Black Pearl replicates over to this Black Pearl, it sends the bucket information, some information about the data policy that's over here, but it writes it to a bucket here that has a different data policy. So it really depends on what your customer needs.
That question arises me another question, but you can use replication, but you can also use writing the bucket in a remote storage location. No? I mean, that Black Pearl can control sending that content to another Arctic Blue or to another tape or another Black Pearl, or no?
Yeah.
What would be the difference between Black Pearl replication and
So the difference would be the infrastructure to make that happen, right? So if you have two Black Pearls with their own storage targets, it's going to be gigabit Ethernet between them, which can go, for really long distance, right? And you pay your provider for the speed that you want, right? If you have a Black Pearl here, but a tape library over here, that's going to be a single mode fiber channel for a long run. And that's going to be pretty expensive infrastructure, and it's going to be limiting, right? So the difference is the infrastructure to get there. Yep. Question?
It's necessary a propagation license?
No. That's included. Yeah. And it's a very good question. A lot of customers they're accustomed to being charged for everything.
Yes.
Yep. I'll be very honest. I want to sell tape. That's how we're going to make our money. I want to sell tape. I want to sell some disk. I want to sell some NAS. But really, I want to sell hardware. That's how Spectra makes our money, right? So we're going to include a lot of services at no additional charge to make it easier for you to sell more hardware. That's what I want. Okay. Now, let's talk about a couple different workflows. Again, just in order of steps. Let's say you have 4K cameras, right? Very high resolution. The 4K cameras record really big data. Anybody familiar with media and entertainment workflows? Yeah. Okay. So your camera comes in having just shot a couple hours of 4K video. That's really big data, right? So the camera card goes into the server. That server immediately transcodes the 4K down to a lower resolution that the editor can then work with. But you need to keep that 4K content. You need to keep the original content, but you don't want it here. It's too big. It takes up too much space, and the editor can't work with 4K content. They transcode to 1080p or whatever, and that's what they do their work with. But you have to keep that high-res content. So the camera card comes in, the transcode creates the lower resolution for this guy. Well, you can send that high resolution directly to a Black Pearl bucket and write it out to tape, right? You can do that immediately so that your high-res content now lives in your archive. And you can get it back if you need it. If something breaks, if you need to pull it back and transcode to a different resolution, you can just pull it back, no problem. But then your editor has the lower resolution version, and they can work with that. once they finish that project, they can then archive that to a separate bucket with its own data policy to go wherever. And that's a different bucket than the high res. So the high res 4K is in bucket 1 with 2 copies on tape, let's say. The finished archive project is in bucket 2, and that's a 6-month copy on disk and 1 copy on tape. 2 totally separate buckets, but all within the same archive. Okay. Does that make sense? Sort of? Okay. The bottom line, whether it's media and entertainment or video surveillance, that high resolution footage, it's big data. Don't put it on primary storage. Keep it on something lower cost to be able to get it back only when you need it, right? So we have, when you have a black pearl, think of it like it's a private cloud, right? You can run multiple workflows within a single black pearl. So your high resolution gets archived immediately, then finished projects get archived to another bucket. Well, what if I have things that Avid can't handle, like still images, pictures? Avid can't handle pictures. So we were working with Indianapolis Motor Speedway, F1 racing. They had like 50,000 pictures, digitized pictures, going all the way back to early 1900s, like all of American racing history. And they had 50,000 pictures that were sitting on laptops or USB drives, totally unprotected. So we changed their archive. They're using Avid with SGL. Go back. They're using Avid with SGL FlashNet and a T200 tape library. We changed that out for a black pearl. Oops. And we gave them Eon browser for all of those still images, and we taught them how to use it. And then they started taking all 50,000 of those images and dragging them onto tape to protect them. It's easy, no extra charge, but it gave them the opportunity to keep all of their creative assets, all of their finished projects, everything within a single archive infrastructure protected on tape. This is the last slide I'm going to show. Again, when you have a black pearl, you can think of it like it's like a private cloud. So if you have 100 users in your organization, you could create 100 buckets, 1 bucket for each user, give them Eon browser. And again, we'll go through this. I'll show you how to use this. It's very easy. You give each user Eon browser just on their system. You give them a black pearl bucket, and they can copy their own data to the black pearl bucket. They can write it to tape every night, however you want to use it. And you can have this plus your media and entertainment workflow, plus your video surveillance workflow. You can run all of these workflows through the same black pearl. But I'm here to help you understand the performance needs and how we would size the black pearl. Do you need 1? Do you need 3? How do you put this together? That's why I'm here, to help you. You know what? I remembered something I wanted to mention back on this slide. Are any of your customers dealing with cybersecurity problems? Ransomware, malware, viruses? Okay. So this is just one example of disaster recovery for cybersecurity. So obviously you have endpoint protection. Spectra uses Sophos, there's WebRoot, there's Cylance, there's McAfee, there's Kaspersky, some kind of endpoint protection, right? You have some kind of firewall, right? That's another layer of protection. You might have security built into your network switches, multiple layers of protection, right? And hopefully those layers will work and stop the threat. But this is a failsafe. This is the last resort. Making a copy on tape and putting it up on a shelf. There's no hacker in the world that can reach that, right? So as you're working with your customers and you're thinking about security threats, we have seen, as a tape company, we have seen many backup customers that they got rid of tape, they didn't like it. Well, these cybersecurity issues began happening and they went back to tape because it's air gapped, right? So keep that in mind as you're working with your customers. So in 5 minutes, I'll start up the simulator and we'll look at Eon Browser. We'll look at what a Black Pearl customer would see as they're managing the Black Pearl. And then, as other questions come up, if you want to go back to any of this, that's totally fine. So, okay. For the webinar, you were invited to download the Black Pearl simulator. If you're not able to get that working right now, that's okay. I'm gonna demo on the screen. I just want you to feel comfortable using the simulator and understand how the simulator can benefit you and your customer, especially if you are developing a script. If you want to develop a script to use Black Pearl as an object-based archive system and do some scripting, you can write scripts against the simulator, and that works fine. Okay. But if your simulator isn't working yet, that's okay. So the login for the simulator is administrator, and the password is Spectra, lowercase. Now, this is a simulator, so it has most of the functions of Black Pearl, but there are some things that, our engineering team is working on the real product, and, guys like me, I go back and I say, hey, I need a new simulator, And they say, no, I'm busy. So certain things in the simulator are a little bit different, a little bit off. So you'll notice things like, it says Verde up here. This is a Black Pearl simulator. So in a real Black Pearl, that won't say Verde. But I want to go through the dashboard. So this is the what we call the dashboard. This is what your Black Pearl administrator will see. Users don't have to see this. And when we go and install a Black Pearl, we train the customer on all of this. So if you don't remember any of this, that's okay. But you do have the simulator, so hopefully you can use it and get comfortable with the interface and understand what's here. So let's just go through the different sections of the dashboard. First, we have hardware health, and we like the stoplight colors, green, yellow, red. So if there's a problem with the system, if there's a problem with a hardware component, a power supply or a disk drive or a tape drive is broken, you'll see a yellow exclamation point or a red X, and you can just click on that to follow the red X, and it will tell you. So if you had a drive that had failed, it would be lit up on the screen. It would show you, the location. You walk into the data center, you call support and say, "I have a drive failed." We send you a new one. Okay. So just easy way to monitor the health of the hardware. Any S3 jobs, any current jobs running will be listed here, and we'll actually start some jobs so that you can see that. Here you get a view of your network. Now, again, because this is a simulator, on a real Black Pearl, we have a separate management and data port, two different connections and different IP addresses. Because this is a simulator, we're just running through a single IP address. But then you get SMTP and DNS information. And then a list of the tape drives that the Black Pearl has control of. If there's a tape in the drive, you get the tape barcode, and you also get information on whatever that tape drive is doing. If it's a read, or if it's a write, or if it's being cleaned, you get all that information right here. We also give you some graphs to just show you how much of your cache or database is used up, your allocated capacity for tape drives, or if you have Arctic Blue, the object disk target, you'll get some graphs for that as well. Unfortunately, the simulator does not simulate Arctic Blue. It only simulates a tape backend. So, but I actually am, I can show you after we get through this. I'm logged into a system in my lab in Boulder, and that system does have Arctic Blue. But it's a test system, it's very busy, so I'll show it to you, but we're not going to do very much with that. So a summary of the tape library partitions. So we've got both tape drives and tape library partitions, whether that's a single physical library with multiple partitions or separate libraries with individual partitions. Any tape partition that Black Pearl has control over will show up here. The pool partitions, this would be Arctic Blue, if we could simulate that. But then we get into what we call storage domains. And I'll go to another screen to explain what these are. But the storage domain is a collection of storage resources that Black Pearl can use. So a storage domain could have one tape library, or it could have two tape libraries or two partitions. It could have a tape partition and an Arctic Blue partition. A storage domain is just a collection of storage resources. And we can define multiple storage domains that the data policy can make use of. I'll explain more about that. The last thing on the dashboard is real-time performance monitoring. So you can see, if jobs are backing up and not completing, you can look at the performance graph and you can start to narrow down, is it network, or is my cache full, or whatever. But it's real-time performance monitoring. So that is the dashboard. So next we're going to go to configuration and advanced bucket management. Storage and policy management. So this is a graphic that you can just refer back to. This has no other purpose than giving you information about the structure. There are these little circled eyes. These are for you to hover over, and it will briefly describe what these are. So let me talk about this for a moment. So the storage domain, as I mentioned, is a collection of storage resources. So you could have a tape partition, you could have a disk partition. Under that disk partition, you could have multiple different storage pools if you want. This is just how it's architected. It depends on what storage resources you or your customer have purchased. So we can define multiple storage domains, and then the data policy makes use of those storage domains. So, for example, let's say in this storage domain, we had a disk partition and one storage pool, okay? And I wanted to have, like I mentioned on Arctic Blue, you can have a temporary copy for 6 months. Let's say I wanted to have a 6-month persistence rule on this storage domain. That would be assigned at the data policy level. We would say for this storage domain, only keep it for 6 months. On a second storage domain, we have a tape partition, and anything on tape is going to be permanent. That'll be a permanent copy. So when we create a data policy, this storage domain will have temporary, this storage domain will be permanent. Okay. But this is all up to you. You can create the storage domains and you can create the data policies to accommodate your customer's workflow. And I'm here to help you. I could have 5 storage domains, and one data policy uses only 2 of them. One data policy uses all 5. If we're dealing with 2 sites, I might have one storage domain be the replicating Black Pearl. Okay, so one member of that storage domain would be a remote Black Pearl. Let's look at that. I don't think the simulator will allow me to set up replication, but let's take a look at a storage domain. So the simulator has a few storage domains already defined. Let's take a look at tape first copy. So tape first copy is in a performance write mode. What that means is that Black Pearl will attempt to write that job to tape as quickly as possible using multiple tapes. So it will stripe the data across multiple tape drives and multiple tapes in order to write it as fast as possible. It sounds good. However, you have to be careful with this, because then in order to read that data back, you either have to load, if you only have one tape drive, in order to read all of that data back, you have to load all of the tapes that have a piece of that file in. Load one, reads it into cache, loads the next, reads the next bit into cache, and it has to reassemble that potentially through only one tape drive. So if you're writing, if you tell Black Pearl to stripe across multiple tapes, understand that to read that back, you have to be able to read across all those multiple tapes as well. So typically I recommend capacity mode. The tape drives are very fast. Each tape drive, LTO8, can write 360 megabytes a second. So most of our customers would rather keep a file or keep an object contained to a single tape. But we give you this option, and again, it depends on the customer's workflow. If they need to flush a lot of data down to their archive very, very fast, performance might be the right decision. Okay. So for each storage domain, we have storage domain members. Now there are 3 different tape partitions. This is a very busy storage domain. That's a lot of members. Typically, I wouldn't set up a storage domain with that many members. But let's look at this. So I just double-clicked on that tape first copy. So this is how the storage domain is configured. These are all of the members. Last night in my hotel room, I thought, well, maybe I can erase some of these, and so I erased all but partition 1 in the storage domain, and I broke the simulator. So again, we have that performance write optimization. We've got a number of other options that I don't want to get too far down into the weeds. I don't want to leave you confused. Again, when we install, we train the system administrator on all of this so that they can run their system. So let me go back to, again, this is a storage domain. Let me go back to that graphic. So storage domain with all the storage domain members. Here's the storage domain, and these are the different members that you can add to a storage domain. Typically for a customer that has tape and disk, I might create 2 storage domains. One storage domain is only going to have the tape, and the other storage domain is only going to have the disk. And then we manage it at the data policy level. Okay, so we've got our storage domains with our storage domain numbers, and now we're going to look at a data policy that manages these storage domains. So let's look at the dual copy on tape data policy. So here's the data policy called dual copy on tape. And again, we've got a number of different options that are set here. I won't describe each one. If you are very technical and if you're interested in understanding all of these options, I'll show you where you can get the Black Pearl user manual. It's very long. It's very boring, but it's very helpful. So in the data policy, we create persistence rules for the storage domain. So you can see we've got 2 persistence rules for this storage domain. Both of these are permanent, and that's because both of these storage domains are tape. A tape storage domain member is always going to be permanent. If I could put Arctic Blue in here, then we could see a temporary persistence rule. If there were replication, if there was replication to another Black Pearl, this is where we would create the replication rule. You can see it's grayed out here in the simulator because the simulator doesn't allow you to do that. But this is where we would create a replication rule for a remote Black Pearl. Again, there are a number of different options. So this again is the storage domains. The data policy links back to the storage domain. So we can go back to the storage domain just by clicking here. But I can move off of the tape, and this is one of those things that it's not quite easy to remember. If I click here, it goes to the storage domain. But if I just click over here, I highlight the rule, and then I can say action and edit rule. This is where we would select, if the storage domain had disk, if the storage domain was Arctic Blue, we could select a temporary persistence rule. Let me talk about isolation. And if it was temporary, here's where we would say the number of days. So 6 months, 180 days. But let me talk about this, the isolation level. So bucket isolation. Let's say I work for the government, and I have data that I'm writing into a bucket on Black Pearl, and it's being written to tape. And that data is very sensitive. And I need to make sure that nothing else except my bucket writes to that tape. I need to isolate that tape. This is where I would select bucket isolation. So once a tape is assigned to a Black Pearl bucket, no other bucket can write data to that tape. That tape is exclusively for the use of that bucket. Okay. This can be very helpful for, again, it depends on the workflow. If you have a commercial customer and multiple departments, you've got marketing and finance and engineering, and you've given them all a bucket. Well, the finance data may be sensitive, right? We don't want finance data going to a marketing department's tape. So we might set that finance bucket as bucket isolated. So only finance will use this tape, and you never have other data being written to that tape. Another example, if you have a Black Pearl and you have multiple customers that you've allowed to use your Black Pearl, you're selling them or you're leasing space on your Black Pearl and tape library, you need to keep customer 1 isolated from customer 2. Right? You don't want customer 1 financial data on customer 2's tape. So we would isolate those buckets. So that can be very useful. If you have many users of your Black Pearl and you've only got 100 tapes, but you've got 500 users and all with their own buckets, and you create bucket isolation for each user, as soon as they write something into their bucket, it claims a tape, and that tape can't be used for anything else. So if you've got 500 users, but only 100 tapes, you run out of tapes very quickly. So, so setting the isolation level correctly is very important. For certain buckets, you may need to isolate. For other buckets, if you don't need to isolate, just use standard, because then a tape can be shared between multiple buckets. Now, Black Pearl will understand where the data is for each bucket. But if you eject a tape that has multiple buckets stored on it, then obviously that data is not available to those buckets. So, does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay. So again, this is the data policy, and we're setting the rules, the persistence rules for the storage domains. And this is the kind of thing, again, when we do an installation, we train the customer. We will have worked with the customer to design their workflow, and we set all of these configuration options in order to enable their workflow. And we set this once, and then we walk away, and we don't have to set it again. The configuration gets backed up, but this is not the kind of thing that you have to do every day. So let me go back here. So why don't we go ahead and use this Black Pearl? So I'm gonna, this is the Eon browser, which you can also download from our website, from the same site that you got the simulator. Let me show you that. So this is what we call our developer site for Black Pearl. And under clients, this is where you'll find a link to the Eon browser, as well as the user guide. And if you are ambitious and you want to write some scripts, this is where you'll also find the Java CLI client. Okay. That's all under developer.spectralogic.com/clients. Okay. So let's go back to Eon browser. So on the left, you can see the file system of my laptop. And on the right, we're going to open a session to a Black Pearl. Now, these are the different sessions that I have saved. So Black Pearl simulator, this is the IP address of my simulator, as you would see it if you've gotten this running. I know this is very small, but if you've got your Oracle VirtualBox VM running, this is the screen that you should see, and your IP address will be right there. So this is my IP address for the simulator. We use port 8080. And these are S3 credentials for the administrator account on Black Pearl. Actually, don't want to confuse you, but let me go back to the Black Pearl. Let's talk about users for just a moment. So when you start the simulator, you only have one user. It's called administrator. You can create another user if you like. That's very easy to do. We say action do. And I'll give myself a username. And password is Spectra. I'm going to leave these options unchecked. Again, if you really want to get down into the details, you can look at the user guide for what all of those means. But what I do have to do for each user, I have to set a default data policy for a user. Okay. So for my username, I'm going to set a default data policy of dual copy on tape. Again, I'm going to leave all of these unchecked, and I'm just going to go ahead and create this user. Okay. So now I have two users, administrator and Steve P. Administrator is going to be able to see all of the buckets. The administrator, when we start up Eon Browser, if we use Eon Browser with the administrator account, we will see all of the buckets that are on Black Pearl. If we use the user we just created, we'll only see my buckets, right? So if you've got 100 users in your organization, you want the administrator to be able to see everything, but each user, they should only see their own bucket, okay? So we have...
Let me just try to present this message in Spanish.
Yes, please.
Esto como ahorita lo que acaba de decir Steve, de que cada usuario tiene una cubeta, es justo cómo funciona Dropbox. Cada usuario tiene una cubeta basada en el nombre de su correo electrónico y puede guardar lo que necesita. Entonces son muy independientes, por eso es muy fácil manejar en Black Pearl una política de retención basada en buckets, en cubetas, para múltiples usuarios y que ellos sean los mismos que puedan bajar su información. Eso no existe ahorita en el mercado. En el mercado, cuando tienes un dato que está grabado en tape, es un gorro hacer el restore del tape con un data nube, bajarlo a un disco y acceder, ¿no? Ese es el gran poder de que puedes tener gran cantidad de información a bajo costo, muy fácil de utilizar, ¿no? Por eso puede ser un target de un backup, puede ser un videovigilancia, puede ser un video entertainment, puede ser dato no estructurado, dato estructurado. Esa es la gran ventaja, ¿no? Entonces es justo como funciona Dropbox, y así funciona también Netflix con las películas, y así funciona Amazon Web Services. Entonces es muy poderoso, ¿no? Sorry.
No, gracias. Okay, so these are, again, just two different user accounts. So let's go back to Eon Browser. I am opening this session to the Black Pearl simulator using the administrator account. Okay, these are the credentials for the administrator user account, and I can see that if I click on administrator and say show S3 credentials. Okay, I like hearing that. That's good. So if you use Amazon Web Services, if you use a cloud account, you probably understand S3 credentials. That this is how Black Pearl works. So I'm going to close that. So I'm going to open. That's not convenient. You know, it's probably because I left my simulator running. It's probably because I left my simulator running. All right, here's what we're going to do. Instead of my simulator, I'm going to open a session to a Black Pearl sitting in Boulder. Someone is probably using this Black Pearl, so I'm going to try to stay invisible. So I am logged in to this Black Pearl now as myself. I'm not logged in as the administrator. I could, but if I did log into the administrator, you would see about 100 buckets here. This is a very busy system in the lab. It's used for a lot of testing. There's a lot going on here. This is my own account. As you might guess, I worked with the San Francisco Giants baseball team. They have a Black Pearl for their media and entertainment archive. That was a fun project. So we've got some couple different sets of data in here. You can see we've got some pretty large, high-resolution files.
Now this was from a tape that the San Francisco Giants sent to us because we wanted to do some testing to make sure in our lab that we could do what we were telling them we could do. So this tape is very likely no longer in the library. And I'm going to test that theory. If this tape is in the library, this job will start, but I won't let it complete because I don't want to move over 4 gigabytes from Boulder to here over the air. That's kind of ridiculous. So, but what you've seen is I've just dragged and dropped, and so it's starting this job. Now, if I go and log into this Black Pearl, let's see if I can remember which one it is. It's 41. No. You know what? This is, I'm not going to be able to do that. So, apologies for the missteps. So here's what would happen if this tape were actually in the library. The Black Pearl would tell the library, load the tape into a drive. It would start reading this data back. It would bring it into the Black Pearl's cache. And then Black Pearl would notify my Eon browser, your data is ready, I'm going to push it to your folder. And so Black Pearl would then push it into this, this temp folder. This is called a RESTful interface. REST is representational state transfer. So there's no timeouts. We don't have to worry about this. This is just, the client is just going to sit and rest and wait for Black Pearl to initiate the transfer. But let me cancel this job. Actually, I'm going to restart the simulator. I hope that works because I really want to be able to do this. So we will reboot the simulator and hopefully this is going to work. So in the meantime,
Solo quisiera preguntarles, pero ¿alguna duda con el Ion Browser? Es algo que no habíamos incluido y no sé si todos lo tenían, pero realmente es un software que es libre para bajarlo de parte de Spectra Logic, Spectra, ¿verdad? El soporte, ¿no? Y una vez que lo tienen ahí abajo y tienen los derechos para escribir al Blackberry o al storage primario, es muy fácil hacer drag and drop, ¿no? No sé, Steve, I don't know, Steve, you have a CyberDog on your computer?
I do not have CyberDog.
El otro que es muy usado y también se lo recomendamos, porque es muy utilizado en Estados Unidos y también tiene el API para conectarse con BlackBerry, ¿no? Entonces realmente ustedes pueden bajar o un browser que está en nuestra página o CyberDog. CyberDog lo que tiene es que también tiene transferencia FTP, por eso muchos de los usuarios prefieren usar CyberDog, que es digamos que más de propósito general, pero tiene el API para BlackBerry, ¿no? Los dos son freeware, lo pueden bajar y basado en eso ustedes pueden ver con cuál se sienten más a gusto, pero realmente con ese pudieran hacer la conectividad al simulador de BlackBerry. Y como dice Steve, también es posible conectarse a un BlackBerry de laboratorio en Boulder, ¿no? Entonces, obviamente pueden escribir Steve si es que desean hacer ya algo más apegado a la realidad de los tiempos, podemos crear un ambiente de laboratorio para ustedes para una reunión.
Ah, sí.
Sí. Exacto. Es tal cual. Ajá. Entonces, otra vez, ustedes que están más en frente del cliente y muchas veces el cliente tiene algunas preguntas con S3, somos ahorita la única compañía a nivel mundial que escribe un objeto de S3 en tape. Ahí hay una diferenciación, ¿no? Pero una vez que esté en tape, también, una vez que esté en S3 de BlackBerry, también lo puedes mandar a una nube pública, tipo Amazon. Y también tienes el conector a Amazon, a Azure, y también bajarlo como S3. Entonces hay diferentes ejercicios de portabilidad que en el workflow que hemos venido platicando pudiera adecuarse a la necesidad, ¿no? De distribución. Entonces hay varias maneras, ¿no? Algunas cuestiones interesantes, sobre todo en performance, de acuerdo a cómo vas metiendo más disco NAS, que también Steve pudiera ahí comentarles, ahorita les puedo platicar, le puedo preguntar a Steve que hable de eso, pero es cómo puedes en un rack de disco NAS meter varios nodos maestros para poder cumplir con el desempeño que XR está platicando, ¿no? Sí, digamos que S3 es un ambiente estándar que lo están utilizando tanto empresas de software como empresas de hardware, y bueno, eso da mucha funcionalidad. Sí, hay parte de lo que hemos venido platicando en los solutions de ahí, pero es 40% del dato creado toca de alguna forma la nube. Entonces sí es una tendencia que va hacia allá, y con este tipo de protocolos abiertos te permite utilizar esa funcionalidad híbrida, ¿no? Entonces,
Okay, so I did find a black pearl in my lab. This one, this black pearl is attached to a small tape library, and as you can see, the black pearl is reporting an unknown status on the tape library. So I'm going to click on that, and let's see what's happening with the tape drives. So it's not finding any tape drives in the tape library. So at this point, if this were your black pearl, you would call support. Right? We do have someone in support who speaks Spanish fluently. Orlando Cruz is a good guy. So he would be able to help you and help you diagnose what's happening. So unfortunately, this job will not complete when we start it, but let's go back to the dashboard. And as you can see, there are a number of jobs that have been started on this black pearl. And these are put jobs, and they are hung up in cache. Now, we're only using about 7% of the cache that's available. So these jobs right now, all of this data is sitting in the black pearl cache, which is a double parity stripe of SAS drives, okay? But the black pearl has not yet told the client that the job is finished. So the client will hold the job open. So no data will be deleted from your host system unless you do it intentionally. Black Pearl will not report that the job is complete until it has been written to tape. So this is, so I've opened a Black Pearl session with Eon Browser. So I'm looking at a couple buckets on this Black Pearl with the account that I've logged in as. But let's go back to the administrator view. This is all of the buckets that exist on this Black Pearl. So we've got quite a few. But right now, we're only able to see the buckets that I have created in my account. So I'm logged into this Black Pearl with Eon Browser with my own account, so I can only see my buckets. So let's just drag a file across. So this went very quickly. It was a very small file. So at this point, you can see from the status bar, the job is already in cache. So what Black Pearl would now do is load a tape into a drive, spin it up, and write that file to the tape. But we know that this job is not going to complete because the tape library is broken. So if we refresh this, now we see a drop-down arrow where I put that file. And what this tells us is that this file that I just dragged over is in the Black Pearl cache. Once this file is written to tape, another symbol appears, a little green tape, and to let you know that the file has been written to tape. And once that's done, this would disappear. Okay. So if we go back to the management interface, this is the job that I just started. This one here. It was actually a 0-byte file, which is why it went to cache so quickly. So for Eon Browser, I can open multiple sessions to multiple Black Pearls, or I can open multiple sessions with different user accounts. So I can have an administrator, window open. I can create yet another one to another Black Pearl. Actually, I don't know if BP demo is alive. I think that was, yeah. I think that Black Pearl was down. That's another one in my lab. Anyway, I think you understand. It's like a browser. It's like a web browser. You have multiple tabs. You can open multiple sessions. So this is for you to just play with and get comfortable. So using the Black Pearl simulator, my simulator is broken, probably because I didn't shut it down properly last night in my hotel room. Actually, I wonder if that got restarted. It did restart. So let's see if I can open a session now to simulator. No. So if you use the simulator, make sure you shut it down before you put your.
Probably you can use another one from the users from
Possibly.
I'm connected to the.
Yeah. Does anyone have a simulator running with the Eon browser?
I have the same error.
You have the simulator running? Yeah. Do you want to come and?
No, I have the same error.
Oh, you have the same error.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting.
I don't know some.
I wonder.
¿A ustedes sí? Sí. Sí. Buenísimo. Pues pásale y mira, enseña lo que sabe.
Oh,
They did it successfully.
they did it successfully?
Yes.
Hey, congratulations.
Probably they can show.
Sure, you want to show? Give me off camera.
Ándale con tu computadora. Y una vez.
Está abajo el que dice el book. Ándale, hasta acá. Ándale. El que está al lado del Zoom, ese. Ese.
Este fue el que hicimos.
Ajá, si quieres, hasta acá.
Okay. So, you can create a new bucket.
De hecho, este es nuestro bucket. Este es el,
Oh, yeah, great.
It's our bucket, and we can create a new bucket if you want.
Sí, y una vez.
Vale.
Sure. And then select. So just do single copy and tape.
Okay.
So now you can try dragging something in.
Something big. We can copy this.
Sure. So you can see that the job came up on the bottom of the screen. if you go up a level in the bucket on the right side. Refresh. So so this is the new job that you just started.
No, this is.
Oh, that's the first one. Oh yeah, that is. So go back and refresh again. Okay, now click down on that, and you can see that the file is in cache. And once it's written to tape, you'll see the tape symbol appear. So it even simulates making you wait for a tape library.
This 3 jobs.
Yep. So the first one, the top one, doesn't appear to have a bucket. That's interesting. Oh, there we go. Okay. So then as the administrator, if you needed to cancel a job or change the priority, you can do that here.
Okay.
So eventually in Eon browser, that job will complete, and you can see you're using up some of the room in cache. So again, Eon browser is, I would call, a manual workflow. It's not automated, it's just you drag and drop. But you can use that at the same time as other clients. So whether it's media and entertainment or the general IT partners that I showed you, Architecta, Comprise, Strongbox Data, you can use all of these at the same time in the same Black Pearl. It's very much like a private cloud in your environment. You can use it however you like. Just keep buying more tape.
Everybody else.
So go back to Eon browser and refresh. And click down on the bucket. What about the first one? So can you go back to the Black Pearl management interface in Chrome? Yep. Configuration. Advanced bucket management. Yep. And scroll down to tape partitions. Okay, so you can see the tape partitions. Well, they are online. Why does it say deactivated? Okay. Click on this deactivated. And say activated S3 data path. So this will enable those jobs to complete. So this is the back end. Then you can go back to the dashboard, S3 jobs, and eventually we'll see these complete now. Just click up on dashboard. So again, it's making you wait for a tape library, but these jobs will complete. You may have to refresh the browser window. But if you go back to Eon browser, Yep, one of the jobs finished.
One of the finished.
Yep, so go back to Eon browser and refresh that. Yep, so there you go. Now you can see it's still in cache, but now it's also on tape.
Finished too.
So because the data is still in cache, if you wanted to read that data back, it will come back immediately from cache. If it's already in cache, Black Pearl knows, and it will give it to you out of the cache, so you don't have to wait for the tape drive. Okay. So that's it. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Preguntas? No? So I am not a scripter. This is not a strong suit for me, but I did take some time a few months ago to just explore so that I could show a very, very simple example. So what I have here is a Windows batch file where I'm able to pass in a few arguments. So if you're a scripter, hopefully this looks familiar to you. And then this is the Java CLI call to the Black Pearl. Now, along with this, let me bring up this. Go back to the clients page and Java CLI references and examples. This is a very, very long page that has a lot of information on the Java CLI. There's a video, one of our product managers, actually our director of product management, created a video to talk about how to use the CLI, so you can watch that. But these are all of the command options that we have with the command line interface. So if you're writing a script and manipulating data within your file system, you can issue a call to a Black Pearl to either put something in or get something out, whatever you need to do. So down at the very bottom of the page, we have some examples of fully completed commands. And this is why I would recommend using a script, because you don't want to have to type all of this every single time. So let me explain what this is. So DS3 Java CLI, that opens the call to the Black Pearl. This is the IP address of the Black Pearl. This is the data path of the Black Pearl. Here are the S3 credentials. So access ID and secret key. This is the bucket on Black Pearl that I'm going to target with whatever command I'm going to issue. Either I'm going to put something in or I'm going to get something out. And then there are a couple command options that have to be in there. And here's where I'm taking in my arguments from the command line. What would those be? These are the different commands that are available. So in addition to that script, PSBP, I would say -C for the command, put object or get object or something like that. But this page gives you all of the options. So if you are someone that is comfortable writing scripts, this page is going to help you construct the command to send to the Black Pearl from the context of the script. And then, if it's a daily write everything to this bucket and you're using it kind of like a nightly dump to tape, you can schedule your script to run every night or every week, whatever you need. But it's a long list of options that are available to you. So lots of options that I'm not going to jump into them now, but if being able to write a script. It's a really good way to sell professional services and make more money for you or for your VAR. So if you have this capability, being able to just reference this page to build the commands for the Black Pearl, write the script, and sell to your client. Very helpful.
Questions?
Saben que nada más esta opción de los scripts sirve mucho para usuarios remotos y bueno, ahí pueden dejar algo que esté corriendo y después puede estar mandando hacia el BlackBerry a cierta hora del tiempo, ¿no? Esto es lo que Steve mencionaba de la posibilidad de tener una nube privada, ¿no? A través de S3 y estar mandando a un repositorio centralizado, ¿no? Se da mucho en organizaciones que tienen diferentes geografías, pero es muy poderoso. De antemano, muchas gracias por su atención. ¿Quieres decir algo?
Solamente para cerrar.
Si quieres pasar.
Muchas gracias por su atención, Steve. Thank you.
Mucho gusto.
Muchas gracias. Y pues bueno, esperemos que les haya parecido muy bien este curso. De todas maneras, para la gente que está conectada o si gustan volverlo a revisar, lo pueden checar en la plataforma de Maps University. Y pues bueno, muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias. You can just start here. Just sell NAS. Everything else can come later. Very simple.